They slapped a disabled girl in public, but they had no idea who was about to walk in next. The sound of the slap echoed louder than it should have in a place meant for warmth, food, and quiet conversations. It cut through the clinking of plates and the soft hum of chatter like something broken had just been announced to the world. For a moment no one moved, no one spoke, and the girl, small, fragile, sitting alone in her wheelchair, didn't even raise her hands to defend herself. If you believe kindness still matters in this world, take a moment right now to like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel, because stories like this remind us who we can choose to be. Her name was Aisha, and she had learned a long time ago how to endure silence. Born with a physical disability that made walking impossible, she had spent most of her life navigating not just buildings, but people, their stares, their pity, their impatience. That afternoon she had gathered every ounce of courage she had to come to the diner alone. It wasn't a big dream, just a simple meal, a small step toward independence. But even that felt like climbing a mountain. The diner itself was warm, filled with the smell of fried food and fresh bread. It was the kind of place where people laughed loudly, where families gathered, where waitresses knew regular customers by name. But for Aisha, it felt like entering a stage where she was the unwilling center of attention. She kept her head slightly lowered, her hands folded neatly in her lap, trying to take up as little space as possible. At first, everything was fine. A waitress smiled kindly at her, helped her settle at a corner table, and took her order without rushing her. Aisha allowed herself to relax. Just a little. She even glanced around, watching people, imagining what it must feel like to belong so easily. Then they walked in. 3 teenagers, loud and restless, their energy filling the room in a way that made others subtly shift away. They noticed her almost instantly. It wasn't unusual, people often did, but there was something different in the way they looked at her. Not curiosity, not even indifference, it was something sharper. They began with whispers and laughter, just loud enough for her to hear. Aisha tried to ignore it, focusing on the condensation sliding down her glass of water, counting each drop as it fell. She had practiced this. She knew how to disappear inside herself. But they didn't stop. One of them approached her table, leaning down just enough to invade her space. His grin was careless, almost bored, as if this was just entertainment for him. Aisha felt her chest tighten, but she didn't look up. She had learned that sometimes eye contact only made things worse. The first slap came without warning. It wasn't hard enough to injure her, but it was loud, humiliating, meant to be seen. Her face turned slightly with the impact, and her eyes filled instantly, not from pain, but from the weight of being reduced to nothing in front of strangers. No one stood up. A few people glanced over, then quickly looked away. Someone muttered something under their breath. The waitress froze near the counter, unsure, afraid. The teenagers laughed, the sound echoing in a way that made the room feel smaller. Aisha didn't cry out. She didn't fight back. She simply sat there, her hands trembling now, gripping the edges of her wheelchair. It was the kind of silence that wasn't peaceful. It was suffocating. After a few more moments of mockery, they left as abruptly as they had arrived, their laughter trailing behind them like a stain. The diner returned to its normal rhythm, but something had changed. The air felt heavier. The sounds were quieter. Aisha remained where she was, staring at nothing, trying to gather the pieces of herself that had been scattered so easily. The waitress finally approached, her voice soft, apologetic, offering to call someone, to help. Aisha shook her head gently. She didn't want attention, she didn't want sympathy, she just wanted to leave. But she couldn't move. Not physically, her wheelchair was fine, but something inside her had frozen. That small piece of courage that had brought her here had been crushed, and now the world felt too large, too unforgiving. Time passed slowly. Nearly an hour later, just as the afternoon light began to soften, the door of the diner opened again. This time, the sound that entered wasn't laughter. It was the low rumble of engines fading outside, followed by the heavy, deliberate footsteps of several men walking in together. They were bikers, leather jackets, worn boots, faces marked by years of experience. They didn't look like the kind of people who came in quietly, and yet when they entered, the room fell into a different kind of silence. Not fear exactly, but awareness. One of them noticed Aisha immediately. It wasn't just her wheelchair, it was her posture, the way she seemed smaller than before, as if she had been folded into herself. There was something about her stillness that spoke louder than any words could. He paused, then he walked toward her. Aisha tensed slightly, unsure of what was coming next. Her day had already taken too much from her. She didn't have the strength for anything more, but when he reached her table, he didn't invade her space. He didn't speak loudly. He simply crouched down so he was at her level, his presence steady, grounded. There was a gentleness in his eyes that didn't match his rough exterior. He didn't ask what happened. Instead, he looked around the diner once, slowly, taking in the room, the people, the unspoken tension that still lingered. It didn't take long for him to understand. He stood up again, his expression shifting, not into anger, but into something firmer, something protective. Within minutes, the rest of the bikers had quietly spread out across the diner. Not in an aggressive way, but in a way that made it clear, things were different now. The same waitress who had been too afraid earlier now seemed to breathe a little easier. A few customers straightened in their seats. The atmosphere shifted, like a storm had passed and something steadier had taken its place. One of the bikers returned with a fresh plate of food and set it gently in front of Aisha. Another placed a napkin beside her, careful not to make a big gesture out of it. There were no speeches, no dramatic declarations, just presence, just respect. Aisha looked at the plate, then slowly up at them. For the first time since the incident, her eyes held something other than fear. There was confusion, yes, but also a quiet, fragile hope. They didn't rush her. They sat nearby, talking among themselves, keeping their voices low. It was as if they understood that what she needed most wasn't attention, but space that felt safe. Minutes turned into another hour, and somewhere in that time Aisha began to eat. Small bites at first, then a little more. Her hands stopped trembling. Her breathing steadied. The weight on her chest didn't disappear completely, but it lightened, just enough for her to feel it. When she finally finished, one of the bikers stood again and walked her to the door. Not pushing her wheelchair without permission, not assuming, just walking beside her, matching her pace. Outside, the air was cooler. The line of motorcycles stood gleaming under the fading sunlight, powerful yet silent. For a moment, Aisha simply looked at them, then back at the man beside her. He nodded once. It wasn't a grand gesture. It didn't need to be. It said everything. Aisha left that day not with the memory of the slap, but with something stronger. The memory of being seen, of being protected without being pitied, of realizing that kindness could come from the most unexpected places. And inside the diner, something had changed for everyone who had witnessed it. Because sometimes it only takes one moment of courage, or one group of strangers willing to stand up, to remind the world what humanity looks like. Before we reach the end, I want to ask you something special. Please comment, "Kindness always wins," if you believe moments like this still matter. If this story touched your heart, if it made you feel something real, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Because every small action helps spread stories that remind us we can choose to be better. And somewhere out there, someone like Aisha might just be waiting for that kindness to find them.